We are in studio, which is a new treat for some of us. Some of us are old hat at this kind of
Just
thing.
once.
The Johnny Truant, thank you for being here.
The got the.
So we're here with the Johnny Truant. We're here with Joe Solari, and we're here with Chelle, Honiker, all of whom are
The Chelle Honiker.
the Chelle Honiker.
How come I didn't get a D?
We'll get to your the at the end of
didn't
the
ask.
program. And I, of course, am Kevin Tumlinson. I'm happy to be included in your ragtag little bunch here.
The Kevin Tumlinson.
The Kevin Tumlinson, the hanger-on of the industry. Now, one of the things that we're going to be talking about, and Author Nation in general is kind of a rebirth of sorts of the what was originally the 20 Books Vegas conference. But Joe has stepped in, taken the wheel, and is going to turn this into something much bigger than what it has ever been in the past, and we're all very excited about that. But we're also talking about, in this episode in particular, the big picture of not just the conference and not just what Author Nation stands for, but also all of the things that are happening in the industry itself. So I'm really excited about that. Joe, first up, what's
Yes.
the deal, to go all Seinfeld on you, what's the deal with Author Nation and the 20 Books Conference?
Well, the thing to keep in mind with this is, I took over these contracts from Craig. That what was made clear at 20 Books is that's over, right? So there's no real affiliation with that show, other than we hope to bring a lot of the spirit that came from that community into this new community. But what I did is there was these contracts that Craig had signed into the next 3 years that he was on the hook for, and it's a pretty significant amount of money. There was no way that was ending. He was either going to have to continue to run the shows or not. And because of his health concerns, he was really looking for a way to get out of that. So I decided that I wanted to see this thing go on. I think that the four of us, well, you came this year, so you got a feel for it. And but certainly our relationships came out of that show, right? We
Right.
probably met there the first time, or at least see each other once a year. And I think that at a very basic level, that is enough of a reason for that thing to continue, is to have a place for indies to come and meet and network and find their tribe. Now, hopefully what we'll be just, exploring today is its significance, right? Like the first part is that's what's happened. Like there's these events that led up to that concluded in Craig needing to get out of these contracts. But there's, I think, something bigger that's going on. And I don't necessarily want to attribute any meaning to it, but there's something going on in the industry that's big. Like there's this bigger picture that's changing, and I'm hoping that we can all discuss how we can participate in that and maybe have more influence on it. Figure out ways that we can use Author Nation as a mechanism for us to get to where we all want to go.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Now, here's my next question really is, why Author Nation? Like, why did you choose that name?
Well, it wasn't necessarily I chose it. If you look at the process, what we did is we opened it up to the community. So right in the beginning, I used the community to help influence what the show should be called. And the first thing we did is we went out and said, hey, give us a bunch of names. And we had this massive list of names. And, of course, we had the, Bodie McBoatface names and all the goofy stuff.
You had Bodie McBoatface.
I had Ryder McRightface.
Yeah.
I did.
And then we went through a process of polling the community as to what they thought was most appropriate. Yeah. And so right from the beginning, I think part of what I can bring to the community is that strategic and kind of not just the strategic view, but the implementation of it. Like, okay, how do we make this thing from the beginning be about the community? Well, you guys get to pick the name. There was a lot of great names. Now, there was a layer on that where it's like, okay, what is something that's not being used by another conference,
Right.
isn't somebody's website? So there's some stuff we just had to, great names we had to filter out. And it got down to, I can't remember what the other two were.
Ryder McBrightyface, of course.
Yeah, that was number two.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Clearly, my votes didn't count.
Great name.
Yeah. Well, your votes count. Just not as much.
Right. Yeah. Weighted votes.
Yeah,
Chelle,
Chicago vote.
You didn't,
You,
you didn't rally enough people to your.
That's right. Yeah.
That's your fault. That's your bad.
I'll do a better job next time. Chelle, you are one of the busiest people I've ever met in my entire life. So
Wow.
I am astounded that you are even a part of this whole thing. But what's your role in this so far?
Well, my official role is the programming director.
Okay.
So I have a team of 13, and we are now filtering through the conference submissions, folks that have submitted talks, as well as our vendors that are speaking. So yes, I am busy, but honestly, this was sort of the easiest yes when Joe asked me ever, because I owe my career and I owe the trajectory that it's taken over the last 5 years to the indie community and to really embracing it, and 20 books in particular, right?
Yeah.
I went to I've been to several of the conferences, the same conferences that we all had the genesis of for 20 books, but I went to the 20 books Edinburgh conference, and that's where I met specifically my best friends, the people that I talk to day in and day out. And so, that's how the magazine got started. That's how Indie Author Tools got started. That's how Indie Author Training got started. Like that specific trajectory was born out of that. But when Joe talks about the community and the things that we want to bring forward from 20 books, it's that spirit of generosity. It's that spirit of community. It's that just vibe that has always been part of it, that you just don't get anywhere else. It is very, very different. But I don't think that was 20 books specific, right? I think that is endemic of our industry at large. And so, like I said, it was the easiest yes ever, because I want to see that continue. And I want to see as many people experience that same career high, career changing, life changing experience that me and my,
Right.
I get to get up and play with my best friends as a job every day. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Why won't we, try and get everybody else to be able to do that as well? That's really kind of the vision.
And everyone around this table is part of the, as Johnny would say, the part of the OG indie publishing world.
Why would I say that? Am I the representative of the streets?
You are. This is your.
He's
You're
the guy with the latte.
You're heavy with the street
Yeah, that's
lingo.
true. You are
I'm just a little hipper.
He's the latte out of 4 black coffees in the room. But I am curious, how have you seen the industry itself change? And not just in terms of the conference and what's happening there, but, how big picture, what's the shift that's happened in the industry over the past 10 years?
So I think the shift went from, we had self-publishing was thought of as vanity, right? You couldn't make it as a trad. You couldn't do something. And so you decided to self-publish. And then people started to figure out, and this is kind of where we talk about the gold rush, right? And we talk about back when it was a little bit easier to gain traction and self-publish and make money. But then it became harder again, right? And people were still struggling with longevity. They were struggling with burnout. They were struggling with following paths that sort of didn't make sense for them. They were struggling with people that came along that were predatory, that had methodologies and things. And so, the industry went through this period where it was cooler to be an indie, but it still wasn't a viable long-term career path for a lot of people. And then I think a lot of things shifted because people really started to take it seriously in terms of having a career, defining success, figuring out what made sense. It's not as it's more mainstream now to be indie, but I look at indie now as a spirit. It's the spirit of being independent. It's taking charge of your career. It's deciding what you want to do. And now I think the future has opened up because you have people that are creating merch, they're creating audiobooks, they're creating omnibus, they're creating videos, they're creating, all these extra things around it, transmedia and all of these different things. And so, the future's pretty much wide open. And when we talk about Author Nation, it's not just authors, it's storytellers, right? Because there's so many ways that people can get their stories out now and collaborate, and it's just a completely different industry than it was 10 years ago because possibilities are wide open and more. Yeah. There's retailers, right, that have opened up new avenues, but there's also more software companies and technology companies that are supporting us in different ways, helping us get wide, helping us stay wide, helping us find the good data and synthesize that data and explaining that data. Like, it's just night and day from where it was the Wild West 10 years ago.
Was it the Wild West? I do kind of
It was.
think of
I
it
think
as
it
Wild
was.
West.
I think it was, because we were sort of trailblazing, right? Because
Right.
if you self-published, you were taking a risk. You were
Right.
having to own that transaction and own all
And
of
the
those
services
things.
that you mentioned, 90% of the things that we all rely on now didn't
Didn't
exist.
Yeah,
so-
you were struggling with KDP and you were just pulling your hair out and crying.
Uploading a book to create space.
Oh my God.
Right.
Oh,
That I
oh,
formatted in
blocked it
Microsoft
out.
Word.
I blocked that
Uh,
out.
Johnny, you looping back to OG, because you are,
Of course,
as right
I
there at the
represent-
front end.
As I
and-
represent the streets.
I mean, a lot of people who came into this industry at that beginning came in because of some of the stuff that you were doing.
I did.
Yeah, I mean,
I
we
did.
all,
Yeah.
not
Yes.
to make your head so big that it fills the frame, but I
Well,
mean,
I am drinking a latte.
you've got some background, you've got some responsibility for the direction that the industry took. So how do you see things now versus when you started?
Well, I love where things are going. The kind of gold rush days where everything was heady. When you guys were talking about just a second ago about 2012 or so, when it was the Wild West.
Right.
I think that it also had this much less professional veneer.
Yeah.
And it was, I think a lot of people, it felt very DIY punk, like we're just going to run off Xerox copies. I mean, it wasn't that far from that. It was, well, is there a cover that will kind of maybe pass as a book cover? And you could always tell the indie published books. Whereas today we're having to conform to, well, I hate to use the word conform because that's I don't love the idea of conforming, but it's true, to match sort of a standard that's much more professional. Book covers, for instance, good enough is no longer good enough. It has to be exemplary. But personally, I love that direction because, I mean, maybe this is a little heretical, I don't know, but I actually kind of like it when things get harder. I don't like it when things are too easy. Because when things are too easy, then people who are maybe not as committed to, you can make money anyway. I feel like the people who are in the space, I want them to love story. I want them to love writing and to have wanted to write. And so there's a hurdle that you need to overcome. Whereas in those gold rush days, it was very much, let's just make some money. And people who had nothing, they didn't even care about writing, were into it. And so, I mean, I love the directions that things are going, but it has changed so much. I mean, I predate, not as an authority in any way, but I mean, I was going to writers' conferences 10 years before that and querying agents and getting paper letters in the mailbag saying, send me 3 chapters, or much more likely, no, this doesn't fit us, screw off, we are not interested in you, sort of an approach.
Yeah, in the earliest days, when I started going to conferences, the things I was encountering were people who were literally, paying to print thousands of copies and selling them out of the trunk of their car. Like, that was a literal thing. And the
That's
very
too
notion,
hard, just to be clear.
yeah, that's your slowest path in. In
I don't want
publishing
things that
success.
hard. I want
I
them
mean,
easy.
was it John Grisham or somebody who did that with his early books? Like he
Sold him out of the back of his station wagon trunk.
He also wrote on coal on the back of a shovel in a one-room schoolhouse.
Yeah, he was hanging out with
Yeah.
Colonel Sanders, subsisting off of fried chicken while he
That
made his
papyrus
career.
and stylus.
Yeah.
But that's that was the early days of this industry. Well, earlier still. I mean, really, if you go back historically, self-publishing's been around since the invention of publishing. So everyone who published in the earliest days was by default a self-publisher. But in the early 2000s, that's when what we think of as this industry really took root.
Yeah.
What do you think the shift in focus has been for those days versus today? Like, has there been any form of shift of focus? Like, back in those early days, my focus was, how do I get a book into print and how do I get people to buy it? But is that still sort of the basic rule today?
I don't think so. I think that you've got to, when we talk about that gold rush period, one of the advantages that indies had, and nobody really understood it except for those folks that were in that space, was that they could see underserved markets, mainly because a lot of these people that were coming into it were readers. And they're like,
Yeah.
you know, I can't find I've read all these books. I can't find any books in this space. That I can't see the story I want to hear anywhere on the shelf. I'll go write it. And they were representative of this untapped market that was there. And traditional publishing was just looking at their Nielsen reports and what was getting sold through distribution, and they had this very small view of the world. And indies were able to see this and react to it quickly, right? And what happened is underserved genres got served, new genres were created, right? That was part of the easy part, right? That now those slots are filled, and then what made it start to compound and being harder is that people saw, oh, that looked, you know, I come up and say, I just got into science fiction and I'm writing all these science fiction books, I'm making all this money, and then 5 other people jump in, and then 10 and 15. And in our helping people come in and trying to lift everyone up, we created supply to the demand, right? So I think that's the big thing that's changed now, is that the indie market has matured to this new level. And the folks that we were talking about that could come in just to make money, that's not as
There's
easy.
easier ways to make money.
Yeah,
Right.
and nor is it as sustainable. And so this gets me to what is the big change, and kind of circling back to Author Nation. And being a business guy, this seems kind of weird, where I think the secret sauce is around community and around brand that people attach their own identity to.
Yeah.
Right? It gets back to stuff that we've all talked about offline, that like we're looking for a more personal relationship with what we consume, right? We don't want to be consumers.
Right, yeah.
We want to be discerning users of what other people purvey to us, right? Pretty fancy stuff, but like the idea of like, oh, I'm into this because it's what kind of defines me. And the more that we start to build brands and help each other as authors to do that stuff, that to me seems to be the fastest, best way for that to work in the future.
Yeah, it does seem more challenging to make money and by extension make a living in this work now. Do you know what's the impact of that change? Like how does the fact that it's tougher now in some respects change the approach that writers should be taking?
It feels like a course correction to me. It doesn't feel like it became harder disproportionately. It feels like it was too easy. That was the anomaly. How easy
Right.
it was before.
Well,
that was the weird
looping
thing.
back to what you said about covers, or one of you said
Yeah,
something about covers. Like there was a time where anything you created in a bitmap app was going to be fine, but the people who took the time to make that cover look seamless with the rest of the professionally generated stuff out there were the ones who sort of easily succeeded. Like, you know, I probably sold based on my covers alone for the first couple of years.
And what I would add is now what indies have done is they've taken cover design to another level. Like trad has to catch up, because indies are going to artists and saying, help me to do these things, help me to capture the tropes of the genre, help me to make this thing work, you know, graphically so that it is identifiable as this
Right.
page at, you know, the size of a thumbnail. There's a level of sophistication that is coming in that has lifted everybody's game. And
Right.
so those are now the table stakes.
Right.
Right.
And those are driven by more sophisticated readers, more sophisticated consumers. I think the one thing that I have been in awe of is how many people maybe were passive readers or read maybe 1 or 2 books and now are whale readers, and they have KU and they are reading
Right.
voraciously, and they're listening to audiobooks, and they're consuming much more. And I think that partly too was the pandemic had a lot to do with that. People were stuck at home and rediscovered reading, rediscovered writing. We had a huge influx of people that said, I've got time on my hands and now I'm going to write a book. I've got time on my hands and now I'm going to do this. Right. So I think people came back to this, you know, entire publishing, whatever medium it falls into. But I think it's been a rediscovery and increased marketplace that has now demanded that people have more ways to satisfy them, and more authors and more storytellers and
Yeah.
more ways.
Can you imagine if the pandemic had hit in 2012, how many of us would own small islands right now? Like,
Ouch.
I'd own, exactly, right? So just the timing of these things.
Sliding door moment, Kevin.
Yeah.
That's just not
Next time.
Yeah,
Next
sure.
whatever.
next.
Convergence, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so what do we think where are we going from here then? Because, we've seen so many changes, and everyone's always making a prediction. And the zeitgeist of the moment right now is like direct sales, which has its challenges as well. But
As long as you're not myopic about it. 'Cause I
Right.
swear that people are looking for like, well, what is the thing?
The thing.
And the thing
but
is
isn't
direct
that
sales.
that's like the constant systemic problem?
That's human
Sure.
nature.
Right. Well,
Sure.
in this industry in particular, though.
Well,
like,
in this industry in particular, because we have people that are native storytellers and some of them are not marketers and some of them are not
right.
business people. Their left and right brain usually has one focus. And so they have to think about it in terms of systemization and how do I do the thing and how do I get to that? How do I batch these things? I mean, it's not native to a lot of people that are creatives to be also business people. I think we in this room are a little bit like maybe equal right and left brain, so we can see both sides of it.
Right.
And that's kind of the unique thing that I see that we're able to do, especially with Author Nation, is that we're able to sort of say, all right, here's some craft,
Right.
Here's a better way to develop characters, but here's also a way that you can maybe create a social post about and introduce those characters. And here's the thing about my future publishing hat for a second. The zeitgeist is direct, but it's direct because we have to own the customer relationship. It's direct
Which is
because
a piece I
we
think
have
people
to create
overlook.
a brand, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to create that connection with the reader, not because we want to sell to the reader, but because that's going to stave off quote unquote competition. That's going to be what you can't replace the humanity of
Right.
being an indie author or an indie storyteller, right? And that's going to be what saves us all from AI, as people get real amped up about generative AI and what that's
Right.
going to do. That's a huge factor that's coming down, but there are ways to mitigate that by staying true to who we are in the industry first.
On that point, I'm talking about direct, I think that this kind of looping back to the Author Nation thing and like, how can we talk about that in a different way, right? So like a lot of what is in direct today comes wholly out of e-commerce, right? It's transactional. It's thinking about, hey, this is how you take a Shopify store and you slap some ads on it and you run the traffic and you do all this stuff. And there's some great stuff that you can kind of glean out of that. But when you instead say, listen, the reason why I'm going direct, and this is, you inspired me with bringing that up, is because you want to own the relationship. You want to be able to manage the relationship
Right.
because it's a two-way deal.
Right.
And now, like you can do, when now I can see the buying occasion, like I see that you bought a book from me, okay? That I couldn't see on another retailer. What do I decide to do with that information? Well, I could start sending you coupons and I can do all kinds of transactional based stuff. Or I can say, oh, I see where you are now on this reader journey in my backlist. How can I make that a better experience? What emails do I send to you? What things might I want to talk to you about? But I now have the ability to do things about my brand and about story and about this experience that I couldn't do before. And I think that's going to be what differentiates in the bigger picture, is being able to do some of that fun stuff and to be able to apply creativity to the sales and customer interaction process.
Yeah, you actually bridged a little bit. I was gonna push back a little bit against the right left brain thing, because I think, and this is a reframe to me. So, and maybe this will help, because this is something that I've thought a lot about recently, and I wonder if it might kind of be interesting to other authors, is we do tend to think, and this is real ingrained, like authors will talk this way. They'll be like, well, I like to do the storytelling, but I don't like to do the marketing, as if it's black and white. There's marketing and there's storytelling, and never the twain shall meet. But so this small personal story. So I went, for the past few years, I was kind of out of this public facing side of things, and I was in the writer's cave. I was doing what a lot of writers feel that they want to do. I was just writing, and I worked with Sterling and Stone publisher, and they handled everything. Like, it was like working for a trad, but with all the benefits of an indie. Guess what? I didn't like it. So, I mean, they were great. I wasn't a right fit because it turns out I didn't want to just write. I wanted the larger art of the connection and the marketing and the designing. Marketing doesn't have to be this left-brained thing that's all dollars and cents and spreadsheets. It's the idea of creating a brand that I get to talk to my people in such a way, and I'm writing emails. These are right-brained things. These are creative things. And so, yeah, there's minutia. So the things that you were talking about, Joe, about like coupons and stuff, you don't necessarily need to go there right away. You can say, well, I'm talking to my people. And then down the road, you're like, oh, you know what? I could make a coupon. Like, it doesn't need to be this wall of like huge imposing things that you either get through or you don't. I just thought that was interesting to see the whole of the selling, the whole of indie authordom as the creative art that we get to be a part of rather than have to be a part of.
I do think the overall shift is from a mentality of reach as many people as possible to reach the right people.
Right.
Which I love.
Yeah.
I think too, it's a shift from having a sales funnel to a sales flywheel. Whereas the funnel, you were trying to just get somebody on the top of the funnel and then move them into your middle of your funnel and get them to the bottom of the funnel and get to a sale. And you looked at that as a transaction, whereas now you see it as a circular, you're continually touch point, conversation. And the sales happen organically through those conversations rather than just looking at it as a transactional, one-off thing. I've got to get them on my newsletter list to get them to this, to get them to this, to get them to my backlist. Like, you still have to think about it in terms of journey, but you can think about it more in terms of organic longevity of conversation.
Let me toss another metaphor in there because that's an excellent point. And so my friend Andre Chaperone, who Joe also knows, you can find him at andrechaperone.net or .com. I don't remember. I'm sorry. But
there aren't that many Andre Chaperones.
Yeah.
So
that's
you
true.
can probably
Chaperon. You can find him.
Shell registers that domain immediately.
But Andre, he's like an email marketing and connection community building ninja, just to put it the short version. And
The
he's
OG of OGs.
Yeah, he is the OG.
Yeah.
That's it. He put the O in OG as far as email is concerned. And Andre started a new thing recently where he's talking about, he did autoresponder madness. I don't want to go into that whole thing, but he started a new venture that he's calling Tiny Worlds. And as soon as I found out he was doing that, I started listening. And he talks about the idea of the funnel or the linear sales process, which goes A, B, C, D. But now what he's talking about is something that I heard Joe and some other speakers talking about at 20 Books, which is the idea of a world and an experience that's much more choose your own adventure. Mm-hmm. And so just to add to the flywheel metaphor, which I also think is valid, this idea of orienteering through a world rather than being led from A to B to C. You can go A to F, or you can go A to Z, or you can say, well, I'm going to go explore this. Giving those readers agency to explore. It's kind of like world building on a marketing scale, which is why I think there's so much interesting, like, creative things to be done, and you don't need to see this as a boogeyman.
Well, another OG marketer in email is Dean Jackson, who I've been following along with Andre. And one of his big tenets is, and he did this massive study years ago, that 85% of the people that buy later than 90 days, right? So they do buy, like they've followed up on it, and it's been across a multitude of industries. So in his view is like, if you don't have a system that's taking care of that 85% and a way to nurture them, and when they're ready to buy, then have like, you're leaving so much of the market alone. And I think that gets back to your earlier question, Kevin, about like, what's one of the big changes? Well, when it was easy, it was really easy to go get the people that were those one, click buyers. I saw the book, I'm here, I buy. Those days are gone, at least in my view. Even if they weren't, the fact that you're leaving all of that other market untapped, which is just really about letting people, like, who here on a product that they love needs to be sold, right? I've already rationalized that purchase. Right. I'll help you rationalize that, right? I've sold myself. So how do I get people to that point? And that has a lot to do with them and this whole experience thing. And how people associate their identity with a brand. Like, what house are you? You know, are you a Star Wars or are you a Star Trek guy? Are you the original series or are you next generation? All those things in a certain community are as important and more valid than where you grew up or what college you went to. We're in that world as authors. We get to play with those tools, and I think that's the cool thing.
Yeah, and so we're at the end of the time we wanted to run this, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. But I think that the moral there is just like in those early days, like the people who knew if I have a high-end cover, I'm going to succeed. If I put professional level work in, I'm going to succeed. I think we're at another low-hanging fruit moment, which is the people who understand concepts like that. They understand the community is part of this. They understand that it's not as linear as it used to be. If you're able to adapt, you'll succeed. That's I think the takeaway.
Well, and it used to be you needed people to fall in love with your books, and while you still need that, it's more important, in my opinion, to have people fall in love with you as a creator these days.
That's a very good point. Yeah. We've said you are the brand all along, but I think now it's time that we really mean it.
Yes.
So, all right. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. For everybody listening and watching, make sure you tune into this whole series, because this is going to be an enlightening look at not just Author Nation and what's happening there, although you will get that, but what the industry is going to look like, where we're going, and how it's going to benefit you as an author, and what the sort of next generation of this is going to look like. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.
See you in the next one. Bye.